Your mission, if you choose to accept it. Now let's take a look at T.U.S.S.L.E and what she had to say.
Satu, you were saying on TikTok that the league doesn't want you guys playing on Unrivaled, the league doesn't want you guys playing overseas. What was expressed to you?
I wasn't aware that they already publicly announced that. I mean, that's wrong. I made more money at Unrivaled than excluding this year in my entire WNBA career, so it's not right.
Now, Satu said a lot. The number one thing she misstepped, she got baited into that question by that reporter. See, Satu forgot what she said on that microphone, and I told you guys after the All-Star game, when they start putting microphones in these ladies' faces, they need to shut up. Satu never mentioned Unrivaled on her TikTok. He just threw that out there. And she was like, oh. So they went public with the news about Unrivaled. No, sweetie. No, they didn't. They never will go public. When you have the leverage, you don't have to speak. You have no leverage. That's why you're speaking. But you were not supposed to speak about it. Nafisa Collier, at its core, Nafisa Collier is a talented player who's not well known outside the WNBA. In the bubble of the WNBA, super talented, popular player, talented player, everybody knows it. Nafisa Collier's main antagonist is A'ja Wilson for superstar supremacy in the league. This is prior to Caitlin Clark, and even when Caitlin Clark came, between these two ladies. So you have that angle. That's huge in this story. So Nafisa wants to be recognized. A'ja's the headliner. That's why last year the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year thing, it should have been flipped. She should have won MVP and A'ja should have won Defensive Player of the Year. But she still wants her shine. Her biggest misstep in creating Unrivaled, and this was the biggest misstep, was not signing Caitlin Clark to an NIL deal. She signed Paige Beckers to an NIL deal, along with Flau'jae Johnson, to promote her league. All they could do was wear t-shirts. But had she reached out and grabbed Caitlin Clark in college, Caitlin Clark will do anything to support women's basketball. And if it was truly about basketball, Nafisa would have had the biggest star, and who would have went in to her senior year with as much fanfare as you could imagine, and still brought that fanfare to the WNBA. That by far was the single biggest misstep in the creation of Unrivaled. With that being said, I'm going to give you what is really the crux of the issues between the WNBA, and it's really more about the NBA, like we learned in NBA Days of Futures Past. I'm going to dive into that. We're going to do it right now. Around the middle of if you go back to the middle of 2024, you didn't hear really a whole lot about Unrivaled. And then around July, you started hearing that, hey, they're going to get this league going. They're going to get it. They started ramping up. The news about Unrivaled started ramping up around the middle of the summer last year, because it had already been conceptualized in 2023 by Nafisa and Breanna Stewart. So around July, I noticed they were talking about the league, and they were saying it was going to be 3-on-3. And I was like, okay. They never talked about the money. They only talked about a few of the players, and they started releasing them little by little. And as you can see, high-powered investors, including Carmelo Anthony, Steve Nash, Megan Rapinoe. And if Megan Rapinoe's involved, then Sue Bird's involved. The two names I want you to remember: former ESPN and Turner presidents John Skipper and David Levy. Remember those two names. See, it's bigger than basketball. Remember, we learned in the Blade video that there are vampires, there are familiars, and there are humans. That same thing applies. So keep these two guys' names, John Skipper and David Levy. Now, Nafisa's goal was to do this, let me get that out the way. Nafisa's goal was to get a few players, a lot of which were UConn alums. That's one thing. That's minor. But what she was doing, and she did a great job of it, she did a great job of staffing the 6 teams with players that had played together or were currently playing together. For instance, Tiffany Hayes, Jackie Young, and Kate Martin had played the season in the WNBA with the Aces. And then you fill in a couple other players to just balance it out. But a lot of times there was common threads. The Miss, the same thing. You had Vandersloot and Brianna, who played for the Liberty. And then you had Brianna, who played with Jewel Lloyd and won titles in Seattle. And you mixed in a couple rookies from the draft class that just came in. Excuse me. And if you go through every team's got players that played together. Chelsea Gray, Azura Stevens, Brittany Sykes, Kalia Copper, they've all played together on teams. They all played together on the Los Angeles Sparks. Sykes and these two played together as well in Chicago. And it goes on and on. Lunar Owls. Nafisa's got her teammate Courtney Williams. And then you have a good mixture of Alicia Gray, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Notre Dame. But like I said, it's the reason why I called it Rogue Nation is because you have different factions in the WNBA who are already fractionalized. They're not a collective unit. They're separate entities. There's an Asia Wilson camp. There's just a regular good old basketball player camp with like Ari McDonald or Chloe Bibby, people of that nature. The same thing with the Phantom. You had Natasha Cloud and Brittany Griner, who played for Phoenix. And then you got a late edition of Sabrina Ionescu, and we'll talk about Sabrina next or later. And same thing with the Vinyl. De'Erica Hamby, Ray Burrell played together. Ryan Howard and Jordan Canada play for Atlanta. So they basically created the WNBA teams with 6 teams. So just imagine if they expand. So that's that part. The biggest part, if you recall in the NBA Days of Future Past, you recall that the NBA and the WNBA got a media rights deal with 3 entities: Amazon, NBC Universal, Amazon, and ESPN. Well, there was in that article, in that video, I said there was an entity that lost out on that deal. That was TNT. So TNT loses out. TNT loses out on the NBA. They've had the NBA for 40 years. They lose out. TNT loses the broadcast rights to NBA Live for games in the United States after the 24-25 season due to the NBA's new media deal with ESPN, NBC, and Amazon. TNT's parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery, pursued legal action because technically TNT gave a higher bid than than ESPN, and they took the lower bid. So Warner Brothers sues. They settle out of court. They settle out of court, and the part of the settlement is Warner Brothers will license Inside the NBA, which is the studio with Shaq, Kenny, uh, Charles Barkley. They license that to ESPN and ABC. That's the reason why. That's the reason why that will be shown on ESPN now. Warner Brothers retains the right to live games outside the United States. So they can play NBA games in Latin America, like it says, in Mexico, Brazil, but not in the U.S. No more games, a 40-year run. Keep that in mind. This is TNT Warner Brothers. So they know this is coming. This has happened. They settled this lawsuit in November. So what happens in October? TNT partners up with former ESPN John Skipper and David Levy. Partners up with them. Now Unrivaled has a broadcast partner. Now the NBA and the WNBA are paying attention. Now Rogue Nation has validity. Now that they got this money, because I was wondering, I kept saying on videos last year, why did they not go for Caitlin Clark early? Well, the reason is right here. Nafisa Collier. Excuse me. Nafisa Collier's ego is so big that she isn't concerned with Caitlin Clark. She's concerned with A'ja Wilson. Mind you, you think about this year, coming into this year, A'ja Wilson was taking digs at Nafisa Collier about not being black enough. So these two have a long running history of female ego dominance. But now Nafisa has two vampires as stakeholders. And now you have Warner Brothers, who now has vampires, saying, hey, we know we like your product. You need a star. You need Caitlin Clark. Mind you, the whole season has transpired. They have watched and benefited from Caitlin Clark being in the WNBA. They understand it. They send her out. She goes on national TV. She's on the Today Show. She's doing the media rounds, promoting her league. They're asking her about Caitlin. She says, yeah, we're trying to get Caitlin. Remember, they were throwing buku money at Caitlin Clark in late October, November, going into December. When Caitlin Clark finally said no, they immediately turned to the worst option Nafisa Collier would not want in her league, but she had to do it. A'ja Wilson. If you remember, A'ja Wilson said, hell no, quick, real fast. She said no. They're scrambling. The season's about to start. They throw a boatload of money at Sabrina Ionescu, and that's why Sabrina Ionescu was on the Phantom. Sabrina comes in. She's not a draw, but at least she's got a name that they can market. Same time, Unrivaled starts playing. The first couple of games, the commentators, Brendan Glass-Sheheen and Lisa Leslie and Sarah Kustok, they don't even mention the WNBA, period. And they do it real calculated, real smooth. How they did it, they would talk around the league. They would say, yeah, and in the other league, in other leagues, she plays well. They would not mention the WNBA for a long time. And then they finally started saying, yeah, in the W, she does this. The girl cooks for the Aces. This girl cooks for so on and so forth. It took them a while to say that on camera. And that was because Behind the scenes, they were trying to bargain with the Players Association and do that illegal naming, get that naming rights, because the NBA and the WNBA own the name, image, and likeness of all their players. So they finally start getting headway, and that's when they start naming the teams that the players played for in the WNBA. So it's really on a surface level, it is the NBA fighting old business partners behind the scenes who are helping try to push a league to go back at them because they lost this naming rights. They lost this media rights deal. And the players, for their part, yes, they it's a rival company. The players have not learned the 4-day laws of power, and the league is using each and every one of them at every junction. Law 14, pose as a friend, work as a spy. Kathy Engelbert went and was dispatched to go check on Unrivaled. You've never seen a commissioner from one league go to another league and just show up and get fanfare. That was calculated. They wanted them to see the operation. If you've seen Unrivaled, they play in a warehouse. It's a warehouse. It's a doctored up warehouse that it was a former Telemundo studio. It's a Telemundo studio that they turned into a basketball arena. That's why it only seats 850, 950 people. Small crowds. I'll leave a link in the description to a video of a guy that was on Unrivaled, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, and you will see why they're not making any money. Crush your enemy totally. That's what the WNBA and the NBA are on right now. That's why they went Denzel Washington training day in that meeting with them, and that's why those players came out of that meeting so pissed, because they told them Unrivaled is dead. Period, point blank. Law 16th. Use absence to increase strength and honor. You haven't heard from the league. You've only heard from the players. And Law 17 is what you're experiencing now. And that's what T.U.S.S.L.E was doing on that video. She was crashing out because she's terrified. Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. That was what you got when the T.U.S.S.L.E said, we're just going to get to the deadline because now it's show and tell time. It's show and tell time. You've put yourself in Law 18. Do not build a fortress to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. Nafisa got her group of players. Remember, they were in the elevator and they were going to the meeting. A lot of those players in that elevator were Unrivaled players. So she has got her faction going to a bargaining table. Law 19. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. They went in that meeting. They were not professional. And they got killed. They did not observe the 48 laws of power. They got two vampires pushing their league. David Levy, John Skipper, who are trying to get back at companies that they used to work for and use those deals to get back at the leagues. Rogue Nation is former business media entities helping control a basketball league with rogue basketball players who want power and control, and they want to be vampires. That is why you have Rogue Nation. And that's the reason why you have no deal. That's the reason why October 31st will come and blow by, and the league will give two shits if it comes, and these players will all sit out, because you got a few entities on the grand scale. They don't give a damn about how much they pay these players. They really don't. And to be honest, like we saw in the video with Alexis Jones, they'll be more than happy to take $250,000 as a base salary, with big increases and all the other perks that we've talked about in all the other videos. They didn't care about that. They don't want to give up control, and I don't blame them. Because if you let Unrivaled get legs and you give the players what they want and they could go play in Unrivaled, they come over and half-ass in your league, go play in Unrivaled, and that media deal will get bigger and bigger. But the one piece that the NBA and the WNBA have is a 23-year-old hooper from Iowa named Caitlin Clark. And Caitlin Clark is the linchpin in everything. Will always be the master chess piece, the biggest chess piece on the board. And the WNBA has her rights for 3 years. The deal with Unrivaled and the media company is 3 years. They had 3 years to get Caitlin Clark into a deal. And Caitlin Clark knows that. And the WNBA knows it too. And they'll never let it happen. And they will let this deal die and make that league die, because they will crush their enemies totally. This is Rogue Nation. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, peace.